Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. We've got folks from quite a few different countries online this afternoon in Australia, and we've still got a few folks joining us. I can see online that we've got a few people that we've worked with before, which is good. This will be perhaps a bit more detail on high return activity and perhaps a little bit more focused information. So for those who perhaps aren't aware, XGAP has been together for about 10 years, and primarily it's been myself, Mark Bragg, and my business partner Martin West that have been working together on that. We've got a good team of people behind us now, but we've pretty much been the founders and the main folks involved with XGAP. Just a few housekeeping things. Probably last about 20 to 30 minutes. I realise most of you are probably on a lunch break, and so we don't want to take up too much of your time. You'll notice on your dashboard there's a little hand that you can use. If you click on it, you can raise your hand. That will sort of alert me that you've got a question or perhaps a comment, and at various times through the presentation I'll try to stop as best I can and go to those. We'd like to try and get as much engagement as we can without prolonging the presentation. If for some reason you lose connection, just reopen your browser and click on the email link, and you should be able to join the webinar again. So just to quickly go through the agenda, what I'd like to try and do is just cover all four things. Just help you understand and identify what a high return activity is, and some key tools you can use to identify high return activities. Talk about the difference between high return activities versus what we call breathing. And then discuss just a little bit and demonstrate why visibility on high return activities is fairly critical, particularly in teams, departments and organisations. So before we get started, I'd like you just to think of a goal, and this could be a goal for your team, or it could be a personal goal. I'd just like to have one in your mind before we start the presentation, and maybe you could write it down. We'll come back to that in a second. So just for those who aren't aware, XGAP pretty much for the 10 years of its existence is focused just on one thing, and that's helping the folks that we work with try and close the gap between what their plan or strategy says should happen and what actually occurs in practice. And we call that the execution gap. Obviously, the shortened version of that is XGAP. Now, to do that, in any organization we work with, whether it's a large one of 5,000 people or a small team of 5 or 6, we pretty much stay focused on exactly the same things. What we're trying to do is to get people to focus on the right things, to get visibility on performance, and then to try and build a strong meeting discipline. Now today, we're just going to focus on the first of those and a very specific part of the first of those. So to get people focused on the right things, we feel like you need a black and white answer, crystal clear understanding of your answer to 3 very simple questions. And those questions are, how are we going to measure our success? What would we need to focus on to deliver that success? And then what would I personally need to execute? And you'll see some names for those down the left-hand side of your screen. Measurable goals, high return activities, and what we call a 90-day contract, which is just 1 page. Pretty much this entire presentation is focused on the second of those, the one I've highlighted there in yellow, the high return activities. So let me just make a sort of a comment on the companies that we've worked with over the past 10 years. Invariably, when you ask folks why they haven't been able to execute well or why they've struggled to deliver on strategic objectives, their first response will be, well, we don't have enough time, we don't have enough resources, we don't have enough people. And I'd have to say that it's been a consistent message right throughout. I can't actually think of any company that we've worked with that's actually said, well, we got plenty of money and we got plenty of time and there's no real pressure on us to sort of deliver anything. That is quite unusual, and I can't ever recall that being the case. So if everyone is faced with this problem of not enough time, not enough resources, not enough people, then you actually have to turn that question on its head. And you have to start thinking about, if we've only got limited time, effort, and resources, how could we make sure that we actually applied those against high return activities? Those things that are going to give us a high return for the amount of time and effort that we put into them. This to me is probably one of the key focus points of managing any team and also managing your own efforts personally. So go back to your goal now and just have this in the forefront of your mind. And I'm just going to show you a graphic way to illustrate. And again, for those who have worked with us before, they will have seen this. But for me, it's one of the easiest ways to talk about what I would call high return activities. So you've got your goal in mind. Just imagine that what you're looking at is a graphic representation of internet usage in a small town, and perhaps the green dots are home users, the black dots are business users, and the red dots are servers. If you wanted to impact that system in some way, clearly you would try and attack or go after the red dots, the servers. Because they have the most number of connections, they will impact the most things. I mean, you could put time and effort into a green dot or a black dot, but essentially you would only be changing a few things. If you are able to actually influence or impact a red dot, you start to impact a series of things. And in that diagram, if you could influence all 5, you would massively change that system. So let's forget for a moment now that this is about the internet, and let's think of it in terms of your goal that you've got in your mind or you've written down. Let's imagine that every dot on that page are things, actions if you like, that you could take to achieve your goal or your objective. The question becomes, what are the red dots? What are those things, those actions that are going to have the greatest impact on you being able to achieve the goal that you've set yourself? Now, to me, this is probably the biggest decision any management team can make or any manager can make, but it's also a personal thing, because really what you're talking about here is how are you going to divide up your personal time? What is it that you need to focus on that's actually going to give you the best chance of delivering on your personal objectives as well? So it needs to take some time, and you need to think through exactly how you identify your high return activities. So let me just demonstrate for you a couple of good tests and a couple of ways to check that you've got your high return activity right. On the screen, at the top of the screen, is a measurable goal or perhaps a couple of measurable goals. Along the bottom of the screen are 5 potential high return activities, HRAs. Now you have to decide which of these 5 is it that is really a high return activity. I think they possibly all could be, but which ones really are? The easiest way to do this is just to say to yourself, okay, what sort of impact is this activity going to have on my goal? Now you can see from the first one, there's obviously a direct, thick line, a very strong connection between that high return activity and actually achieving measurable goals. On the second one, as you move across to the right, still connected, still strong, still a solid connection with the measurable goal. As you get to the third one, there's a little bit of doubt. There's some, maybe an indirect connection. As you get to the fourth one, even less. And when you get to the fifth one, you're basically saying, look, I thought this was an activity that I should be focused on, but in reality, this has no impact whatsoever on me achieving my measurable goal. So essentially, just thinking that way makes it very easy for you to determine exactly what it is you need to focus on. The first 2 are clearly things that are high return activities. the third and the fourth one, there's some questions around those. And then the fifth one, well, if there's activity out there that's happening that has no relationship with the goal, that's something you need to stop. Now, stopping activity is almost as important as identifying high return activity, because I can almost bet in most organizations there is a whole bunch of activity that goes on that absolutely has no impact whatsoever on people and the team, the organization being able to achieve their goals. And all those activities do, if you don't stop them, is that they sap your resources, they sap your ability, they sap your energy, and in the end, for no result. Now, you might think this is straightforward, but I've seen a lot of organizations take up strategic initiatives, certain things that they think are important, whether it's training, introduction of new systems, introduction of new web applications, but in reality these things have either little or zero impact on their ability to achieve a goal, and what they do in the end is they just diminish your ability to actually be successful. So being able to stop things is just as important as being able to identify high return activity. Now, the second test is that you have to, the more specific you can be with your high return activity, the better and more impact that activity will have. So, and this is really for you to think through personally, or if you're working with your team, to think through with your team. Let me just give you two very simple examples. Some years ago, we worked with a shipping company in Singapore that had, I think at the time, about 90 oil and gas tankers that they used to transport oil and gas around the globe. And we had their senior management team, and we also had the ship's captains and the superintendents. Ship's captains responsible for the vessels, superintendents administer a fleet of vessels, up to 10 or 12 vessels at a time. They told us that communication was one of their high return targets or high return activities. They needed to improve this. But that's a very broad thing, particularly in a company like theirs, which was $1 billion operation. And we said, be more specific. Tell us exactly what you mean. The first thing they said was, well, it's really the communication between the ship and the shore, which seemed to make sense. Okay, now we're getting a little bit more specific. Then they said, you know what, it's really only the communication between the captains and the superintendents, because the captains are running the operational side, the vessels. The superintendents are the administrative body on shore. And we thought, well, now we're very close, and we're getting close to exactly what we're talking about here, being specific about the high return target or the high return activity. They went one step further and identified 10 captains, 4 superintendents, and the exact type of communication. And now once they've done that, that makes it very, very hard, very, very easy now to actually impact that. And they will have way more impact with something focused like that than you would if you had started with something as broad and grey as communication. Here's a second example, a sales example. You know, you could start out by saying, well, we want to focus obviously on our customers. We think any activity with our customers is going to be important. But you might want to start identifying and launching some action on your competitors' customers. And maybe you just want to go after your top 20 competitors' customers, and then maybe what you could do is say, look, let's go after our top 20 competitors' customers and let's just use this one product. You can see just from that diagram how you've gone from something quite broad to something very, very specific. Again, the more specific you can be, the more impact you're going to be able to have once you start to launch action that you feel like is going to help you achieve these goals. Now, I notice we haven't got anyone with their hand up. I won't stop, but please, if anyone wants to ask a question or pass a comment, please just let me know, and I'll open up your mic, and we'll allow you to have your comment or your question. So let me just show how this might work in the two different teams in an organization when we're talking about high return activity and really focusing that high return activity on measurable goals. Here's two examples. The first, a sales example, an easy one. The second, a finance team, a little bit different. So they have some what you might call obvious measurable goals for the sales team. It's a sales goal, a margin goal, and a new product goal on the number of units they've sold. The second example is for a finance team, and they've got annual budgets that they have to deliver on time. They're trying to reduce the number of audit errors they have, and they want to introduce a new accounting system. They've got 5 milestones that they'd like to try and hit, and you can see the current values, or where they're currently at, is sitting there in red. So you go to the second question now, which is what we're talking about in this webinar, which is the high return activities. Let's have a look at the high return activities in these examples that these teams have actually selected. So the sales team have said, you know, for us, if we focus on our key accounts, our A-class customers, the promotional events that we've got coming up, and training our sales team, they are the 4 most impactful activities that we can have to try and deliver on our measurable goals. For the finance team, they're saying, look, we have to communicate with the general managers who are actually going to put these budgets together for us. So they're going to be critical to us delivering our budgets on time. We need to train some of the staff because we're getting a lot of audit errors. And in fact, to do this, we want to make sure we've got an audit checking system in the new accounting system. So they're identifying 3, and these are actually real examples of teams we've worked with that have identified 3 or 4 things that are going to have an impact on their measurable goals. So that's kind of at a high level, but you can even take it down to the next level, and you absolutely need to take it down to an individual level, because ultimately when you, as a team or an organization, it will be the individuals that have to deliver and execute. So you need to be sure, what is it exactly we want each person to deliver? What are the high return activities for each person in my team? Now what you're seeing on the screen here is an example of what we call a 90-day contract. It's just 1 page, and on that page is some very specific high return activities for a single person. Normally we restrict it to 3, possibly 4, but certainly no more than 4. And what we're saying in this case, if you have a look at this example, sales example, the high return activities are key accounts, A-class customers, and promotional events. And they've got some outcomes and some measures based around those things. Now, the thing about this is the main resource that you're going to have in your business is going to be your people, their time, and their effort. And if you haven't got them focused on high return activity, in many respects, you're doing them a disservice. You're actually squandering or wasting their time, effort, and resources. So for me, whenever you go through this process, I think it's critical, as you know, from a management standpoint, that everyone on your team knows specifically what it is that their personal high return activities are at any point in time. We normally choose 90 days because obviously that fits nicely with the financial year, but it also fits nicely from a strategic standpoint as well. Okay, so let's just talk a little bit about breathing. From an anatomical point of view, it's an automated response. Breathing you can control, but normally you don't think about it, and essentially it just happens. It's an automatic thing. So breathing activities are pretty much exactly the same. They're those things that you would automatically do during the course of your job. You don't really have to think about them. They're important, but you don't have to put your focus of attention on them, and you don't have to think too much about them. Again, they're important to what it is you're trying to achieve, but you don't have to focus on them. So as an example, if we looked at our diagram again and we had all these things, all these activities here that we've listed, things that are going to help us achieve our goal, the red dots are high return activities, and there will be a portion of the others that are just breathing. Those things are going to happen whether you put your time, effort, and focus on them or not. They will just occur. They are not high return activities. So now, obviously we don't want you to stop breathing because clearly it's important to the business and those things need to occur, but we don't need to put our focus of attention onto those things. Okay, so I want to get to the very last point here, and that is getting visibility on activity and why that's important. Let me just use this example. You imagine you've got a sales target here, a sales goal, and you know to achieve that goal, there are activities that you need to undertake, your sales team or your team generally need to undertake to actually achieve that goal. But if you couldn't see what those activities were or how people were actually behaving and acting, it would be very difficult to make any adjustment or to make any assessment about exactly what you were doing. I often use the example of a sports coach sitting on the sideline and being able to see the scoreboard but not being able to see the game. In other words, the scoreboard's ticking over, but you can't really see what's driving the scoreboard, what the play is. Now, if you're in that situation where you're not focused on tracking and have visibility of activity, you're virtually flying blind. And there are numerous businesses that we've walked into that have good tracking systems. They know what their budget is, they know their market share, they know their margin, they've got visibility on all those goals, all those metrics, but they can't see what the activity is underneath that, what is actually driving those particular results. So if you opened up the box and you had visibility on that sales revenue target, the things you might be seeing is how many phone calls are we making to our prospective customers? Who are we actually calling? What are the call targets? What's the results of the emails that we're sending? What's the quality of the calls we're actually making on our customers, and how often are we doing it? So now if you have visibility on those things and you can adjust those things, then you have a chance to try and change that revenue target or adjust it if you're not particularly making it. Again, visibility. So how do we do this? I just want to show you very quickly, and again, those that have been on the line will see this, have seen this before, but those that have been with us before, but I just want to run over it again to sort of demonstrate the point. We have an application that's basically cloud-based, and essentially what you're seeing here is the entire key activities, not only for the team, but also for each individual. So you're seeing the 90-day goals at the top. In the middle, you're seeing the high return activities. Again, it's the sales team example that I showed you before. And you can even see a summary of what each person in that team is focused on. It shows, for example, Colin Johnson that's sitting in the middle of the page there, focused on sales training, training material, promotional events, and field visits. The application is set up so you can navigate around any department within the organization. So if you wanted to go to the finance team, you would get the same thing. And if you wanted to drill down and find out what any individual person is doing, you could actually bring up their 90-day contract and see specifically what their high return activity is. So let me just give you a quick summary and a couple of key points to go away with. To me, being able to focus your time, effort, and resources on high return activity is a constant challenge for everybody. You're really trying to eliminate wasted time and effort, and you're trying to make sure the resources you do have are focused on those things that are going to give you the best chance of success. You have to choose those things that are going to have a direct impact on the goal, and if possible, be as specific as you can. I think it would be fair to say in the organizations we've worked with, not only do they get better at identifying high return activity, but they actually get better at being very, very specific about what it is they're focused on. And then the last thing is that you have to have some visibility on the activity. If you don't have visibility on the activity, it is very hard to change direction, to cause change to happen, and to influence the ultimate goal or objective. There is one thing I on the point 2 there, It says, will this have a direct impact on my goal? I just refer, some of you may know, some of you may not, prior to me working in this position for the last 15 years, I coached professional sport for about 20 years. I started quite young. I was only 19. And whenever we would meet with the coaching staff or even some of the players, and they would come to me with thoughts and ideas on our game plan or how we might change the way we played, my ultimate question was, will this help us win? If we do this, is this going to have an impact on our result? And everything was done through that lens. Because if you are doing anything at all that doesn't have an impact on the ultimate result, you really have to have some question about whether it's necessary to do in the first place. So that's it, guys. I think I've come in just about on the half hour, but I do have 5 minutes left, and I'm quite happy to open up any of the microphones. If there's someone that would like to ask a question, please just raise your hand, and I'd be more than happy to just put you online. I'm just scrolling down the list here. I can't see anybody putting up their hand at this point. No questions. Hopefully that means everybody understood. So guys, just one last thing. If you feel like your team or your organisation is having a bit of a challenge with this, we normally run a one-day alignment workshop if you're interested in talking about that, which really ensures that everyone, the team collectively and each individual, walks out very clear about what their high return activities are. And, you know, if you don't feel you want to go to that length, you just want to sit down and have a chat about it, I'm more than happy to get on the line or on Skype or even sit down and have a coffee and just talk about trying to help you identify high return activities for your team. We've been recording this, so we'll email you a copy of that, and please feel free to share it with any of your friends and colleagues. In the meantime, if you've got any questions at all, please don't hesitate to just email me on the emails that you can see on the screen there. So I still don't. Oh, I've got one question here. Bernd, I'll just open up your mic just before we finish up here, guys. Bernd, go ahead.
Can you hear me, Mark?
I can. It seems like you just fell over. Yeah, I can hear you. I think everyone else online can hear too. Bernd, go ahead.
Fantastic. My question was pretty simple. You mentioned breathing,
which
is one of my focal interests, and I'm having a little trouble imagining what sort of activities you've got in mind there that don't need any focus. The question I'd have is, have you got any good examples of breathing activities? I'm having trouble imagining one that.
I think there are things that folks would do regularly. For example, if you had a sales and service team, the answering of emails within 24 hours. Quick response times, those sorts of things. I mean, anything that you would normally do in the course of your daily activity. If it was a finance team, the processing of invoices. If it was, and I understand, you're in the development of IT, the normal course of events in the development of things, not specifically targeted activities that if you don't focus on them, they're not going to happen. And that I think is probably the best way to try and define the two. Whereas breathing, you don't have to really focus on it because you know it's going to happen through the course of events. A high return activity is really something you're saying, look, if I don't focus on this and put my attention to it, it's probably either not going to get done or it's not going to get done to the level that I expect it to or that we need it to try and be successful. Does that answer the question, Bernd?
Yeah, I think I got that. I think it was just the word focus that threw me there. As,
sure.
When we're answering emails, I certainly focus on them.
Yeah. I think we're talking
a lot of the day. So
sure.
Understanding what you meant by focus there really helps.
Terrific. Okay. Any other questions, guys? You just have one quick look down the list. No, we don't. So look, everyone, thanks so much for taking the time out of your day. I appreciate it. I think our next one will be in about 3 weeks' time. But thanks for joining us today, and I hope you have a good rest of the afternoon and enjoy the weekend. Thanks again.